Chapter 6. I didn't know what came over me right then. I'd been so afraid, so terrified, but it was like something just snapped in my head. I couldn't just hide and watch. I couldn't. You filthy! I jumped to my feet. I snatched up a piece of rusted pipe from the ground and started to climb over the wall. I guess I just went crazy or something. It had to be craziness, because there was no way that I, alone, armed with a piece of pipe, was going to accomplish anything. No. The Andalite's silent cry made me hesitate. I felt Marco's hand grabbing at my shirt and pulling me back. Tobias and Marco held me down. Rachel put her hand over my mouth. I was trying to scream or curse or something. Shut up, you idiot! Marco hissed. You're just going to get us all killed! Jake, don't! Cassie put her hand on my cheek. He doesn't want you to die for him. Don't you realize? He's dying for us! I shoved Marco and Tobias away angrily, but I was in control of myself again. I peeked over the wall again. The Andalite prince was helpless in the grasp of Vizier 3. I saw him held high in the air. I saw Vizier 3 open his monstrous gaping jaws. I saw the Andalite fall into that mouth. The mouth closed. The teeth ripped the Andalite apart. And the Andalite prince Elfignor Cyrinal Shamtul died. At the very end he cried out. His cry for despair was in our heads. His cry will always be in our heads. The Hork-Bajir controllers began making a huffing sound like whoa, whoa, whoa. Maybe they were laughing or applauding. The Taxon controllers rushed forward and crowded around Vizier 3. They seemed to be stretching up toward him, and then I saw why. A piece of the Andalite fell from Vizier's jaw, and the nearest Taxon greedily gobbled it up. Tobias turned away and covered his face with his hands. Cassie had tears streaming from her eyes. So did I. I heard a sound that was strange because it was so normal. It was laughter. Human laughter. The humans, the human controllers, because that's what they were laughing. Like they were at some kind of a show. For a moment, it seemed to me that one of those laughing voices was familiar. Like I'd heard it before. But then the sound was swallowed up in the huffing of the Hork-Bajir. Vizier 3 morphed out of his monstrous form and slowly regained his Andalite body. I heard him think. Nothing like a good Antarian bog morph for taking a bite out of your enemies. Again, the human controllers laughed, and the Hork-Bajir controllers huffed, and I heard a familiar human laugh I could not quite place. Marco started throwing up. It was an understandable thing to do, but somehow that sound caught the attention of the nearest Hork-Bajir. The snake head turned. He was perfectly still. We were perfectly still. The Hork-Bajir turned toward us. The nearsighted eyes were aimed directly at our little hiding place. I don't know who panicked first. Maybe it was me. Maybe we just had all the fear and horror we could stand. It was like an electric shock went through all of us. We were running before I had the chance to even know what I was doing. I ran. I gasped for air. A cry went up from the Hork-Bajir. Split up! I yelled. They can't follow all of us! Marco and Tobias and Cassie took off in 3 different directions. Rachel was still right beside me, glancing back. I saw the Hork-Bajir hesitate, unsure of who to chase. Rachel and I are the fastest runners. Tobias is totally out of shape, and Marco and Cassie are too short to be really fast. So I figured if the aliens were going to chase anyone, it ought to be us. I guess Rachel thought the same thing. She slowed down just a little and began yelling and waving her arms. Come on! Come on, you! And then she said some words I didn't realize Rachel even knew. The 2 nearest Hork-Bajir snapped around and took off after us. Gavrash! Here! Gavrash Fiat! Enemy! Get! Even in my panic, it surprised me. They were talking some mix of their own alien language and ours. Gavrash! Fiat Nahar! I get! I kill! I ran. Suddenly my foot slammed something and I was down. I hit the ground hard. The wind was knocked out of me. I tried to fill my lungs again. Rachel ran on. She didn't know I'd fallen. A spear of red struck a concrete pipe just beside me. The concrete vaporized. The 2 Hork-Bajir were coming after us, bounding like some devil kangaroos. I was up, running, and Rachel must have realized I wasn't with her anymore. She stopped and started to come back toward me. Don't be an idiot! I yelled. Run! She hesitated just a second, but she knew she couldn't do anything more for me. She ran. I saw a dark hole ahead and raced toward it, a doorway. Inside it was as black as a grave. It was one of the buildings that had almost been completed. just bare concrete walls and scattered junk. But I knew I had been in here before. Marco and I had walked all through it. There were hallways and little side rooms. It was like a maze. Marco, Rachel, had they gotten away? And what about Cassie and Tobias? I tried to get my brain to concentrate as I scurried across the first big room. There was a corridor, somewhere. I groped in the dark and found a wall. I heard the sound of claw-like feet, rending huge, tearing claw feet scraping over the bare concrete. A bottle went skittering across the floor. The Hork-Bajir was close, and in the total darkness, my superior human vision wasn't much use, but I knew my way around the empty building. At least, I would have known my way around if my brain had been working. I felt my hand go into emptiness. A doorway, yes. It led down a hallway. I went through, just as the light came on behind me. Someone had brought a flashlight. "If not, to tell fella not fit! Whatever order!" No need to capture them. Whoever you find, kill. The first voice had been Hork-Bajir. The second voice was human. And the weird thing was, the voice sounded familiar. I tried to think. I knew I'd heard that voice somewhere. Where? "Just save the head," the human told the Hork-Bajir. "Bring that to me and we can identify it." I slid quickly along the wall. The light followed just steps behind me. I racked my brains. Had there been a passageway? Yes, there it was. As silently as I could, I slipped into it. The flashlight beam was just inches behind me. I kicked something soft. "Hey!" It was a man. He had been lying on the ground, wrapped in a blanket. "Hey! Get out of here! This is my place, and I ain't got nothing for you to steal." I started to warn him, but one of the Hork-Bajir was still there. The flashlight landed on the homeless man's face. He blinked like an owl. There was an alcove right behind me. I backed through. The homeless guy screamed. I heard the sound of a scuffle. Maybe the guy got away. I hope so. But I never found out because with the Hork-Bajir distracted, I ran. I ran and ran and ran. And as I ran, I really hoped it was all just a dream. Chapter 7. Somehow I made it home. I don't know how. I have no memories of anything after the last sight of the Hork-Bajir. I wish I had no memories of anything that happened that night. If only I could forget it all. I called around to the others. Everyone was shaky, but they were all alive. Rachel kept trying to apologize for leaving me. Marco just kept asking me if I was sure this wasn't a dream. I guess I should have had the worst nightmares of my life that night, but I didn't. The world of nightmares was a joke compared to my new reality. But by the next morning, a Saturday, I half believed it all had been a nightmare. The only thing that seemed real, really real, was the way the Andalite had of smiling with just his eyes. I woke when my mom started pounding on my door. "Jake, are you awake in there?" I was now. Yeah. I groaned. "I'm up." "Your friend Tobias is here." Tobias? What was Tobias doing here? "It's me," Tobias's voice. "Can I come in?" Sure. I sat up in my bed and blinked several times, trying to get my eyes unglued. The door opened. I heard Tobias say thank you to my mom. He was glowing. I swear he was glowing. Not like he was radioactive or anything, I don't mean that. It's just that his eyes were shining bright and his face was one big grin. And he seemed to be tingling with energy, bouncing like he couldn't stand still. "I did it," Tobias said. I tried to get my hair to go in one direction by raking my fingers through it. "What are you talking about?" I was yawning when he answered. "I became Dude!" I stopped yawning. My mouth actually snapped shut. Dude is Tobias's cat. Huh? Tobias glanced around like there might be spies in the room. "I became Dude, just like the Andalite said." I just stared. "It was so amazing! It didn't hurt or anything. I was just petting him and thinking about the whole thing last night, right? So I thought, why not give it a try?" He was pacing back and forth, snapping his fingers, bursting with enthusiasm. Very unlike Tobias. "I didn't even know how to begin, so I just made sure the door to my room was locked. Fortunately, my uncle was asleep." Tobias had the most screwed up family I know. He never knew who his father was, and his mom just decided to leave him a few years ago. Since then, he'd been shuttled back and forth between his uncle here and his aunt, who lives on the other coast. His aunt and his uncle can't stand each other, and it's like Tobias is some burden they each try to shove off on the other.
I get the feeling neither of them cares about Tobias. So there I was, just sitting on my bed, thinking about it, concentrating, thinking about becoming dude. I looked down at my hand. He grinned at me. What do you think I saw, Jake? I shook my head slowly. I don't know. I had fur, Jake, and I was growing claws. You should have seen the real dude. He went nuts. I had to put him outside before I could morph all the way. He clawed me up pretty good. Tobias stuck a sliced finger into his mouth. I swallowed hard. Okay, this was definitely crazy now. Tobias? Is it possible you maybe just dreamed this all? Not a dream, he said. Now he was serious Tobias again. The grin was gone. It's all true. Jake, all of it. His eyes met mine. I knew what he was saying. He had tried to pretend it was all a nightmare too, but it was real. I looked away. I didn't want to start believing it had all been real. I wanted it all safely stored away in my head. Just another bad dream. Bad dreams should stay in your head, not come jumping out into real life. I just kept concentrating on changing, Tobias said, and in a few minutes I was not myself anymore. His eyes bored into me. You have no idea what it's like, Jake. Being a cat, I can't even describe it. You're so strong, for one thing. Just all this coiled power. And the way you can move. You know what I did? I jumped onto the dresser 3 feet straight up in the air. And I landed like a feather. 3 feet! You know how high that is when you're a cat? It's like a person jumping maybe 30 feet straight up. He stopped suddenly and looked at me. You don't believe me, do you? He said. Look, Tobias, it's just that sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between something real and something you're just imagining or dreaming. You think I'm crazy. I considered for a minute. I don't know, Tobias. Let's review the facts. You say you turned into your own pet cat. Turned into an actual cat. Yes, I have to say that sounds crazy to me. Tobias nodded thoughtfully. He gave a little smile. I understand, Jake. You still don't want it to be true. What? You mean do I want to believe that you can change yourself into a cat? And all the rest of it? Do I want to believe that Earth is being invaded by slimy slugs who live in people's brains and turn them into slaves? Do I want to believe that? Duh! No! I don't want to believe any of it. And how about the Andalite? He asked in a quiet voice. I hesitated. I don't know why, but I didn't want to pretend the Andalite away. Tobias put his hand on my arm. Stand right here. What? What are you going to do? I'm going to help you decide whether it's real or not. Tobias, just wait and don't scream or anything. So I waited. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Tobias just stood there. I glanced at his face. His eyes were different. The pupils weren't completely round anymore. I swear there was a reflective greenish light in them, and his mouth was protruding a little bit, puffing out. He was shrinking, growing smaller, right before my eyes. The neck of his shirt was loose. His pants started scrunching up at the ankles. He was shriveling. And at the same time, fur, yes, fur, began to grow on his hands and neck and face. It was gray, striped with black, just like dudes. I had this absurd desire to start giggling. Tobias was becoming a tabby cat. But I knew if I started giggling, I'd just keep on and never, ever be able to stop. Tobias was more cat than human now. The pointed ears rose atop his head. The whiskers stuck straight out from beneath his delicate pink nose. He had dropped to all fours, clothing now half draped over him, like so many rags. His tail twitched. Yes, his tail. I wondered if I would just drop dead from the lump that had just filled my throat, or from the jackhammer pounding of my heart. Then I wondered if I was still asleep. But if it was a dream, it was a really convincing one. I was standing there in my bedroom, staring down at a gray-black cat that less than 2 minutes earlier had been my friend, Tobias. Chapter 8. I hope I'm asleep, I muttered. I really do.
You're not asleep.
Is that you? I demanded of the cat.
Can you hear me?
Tobias sounded surprised, although sounded wasn't quite the right word. Yes, I said cautiously.
I didn't know I could send thoughts like this.
Tobias said.
Just like the Andalite.
I guess it only works when you're morphed. I am talking to a cat. I realized, and I thought Tobias was crazy. I wondered if Tobias had heard my thought. I concentrated. Tobias, can you hear me?
Yeah,
He said.
I can hear you.
Did you hear my thoughts before that? I asked.
No, I don't think it works that way. You have to think at me for me to hear. Hey, watch this.
Suddenly, Tobias leapt through the air. He pounced precisely on an autographed baseball that was lying on the corner. Maybe a 4-foot jump.
This is so excellent. Hey, pull a string for me to chase.
Pull a string? Why?
Because it's so fun.
I dug in my desk drawer and found a length of string left over from a birthday gift. I'm not exactly big on keeping my room clean. The string was from a birthday 2 years ago. How's this? I drew the string slowly across the floor, a foot or more from Tobias's nose. He settled back on his haunches and began wiggling his hindquarters. He pounced. He landed on the string, grabbed it in his sharp teeth, rolled over, and began ripping at the string like it was the only thing on earth that mattered. I pulled the string away, but he pounced again.
Yes, got it.
Tobias, what are you doing?
Pull it faster. I see it. I got it.
Tobias, what are you doing? I shouted. You're playing with a string. Suddenly he stopped. His tail twitched. He looked up at me with those cold cat eyes, but I'm sure I saw a look of confusion there.
I don't know.
He admitted.
It's like I'm me, but I'm also dude. I want to chase strings and, oh man, if only there was a real live mouse around. I'd really love to track it and to follow it so quietly, to listen to its heartbeat, to hear its scratchy little feet. I'd wait till just the right moment, and then a perfect pounce through the air, claws stretched out.
He extended his claws to demonstrate. Tobias, I think we're learning something here, I said. Amazing how quickly I was becoming used to the idea of talking to a cat.
What? What are we learning?
I think you aren't just Tobias. You really are a cat. I mean, you have all the same instincts. You want to do the things cats want to do.
Yes, I can feel it. It's like I'm two different animals melded into one. I can think like a person and like a cat.
You'd better change back, I said. He nodded his cat head up and down. Very weird to see, I can tell you. A cat nodding yes in a thoughtful, normal manner.
You're right.
The change back to human form was at least as strange as the change to cat. The fur disappeared, leaving bare patches of pink skin behind. A nose grew out of the flat cat face. The tail was sucked up like a snake going up a vacuum cleaner. Tobias stood there, looking embarrassed. He quickly pulled on his clothes. Maybe with some practice we can figure out how to change back into our clothes. We? He smiled his gentle smile again. Don't you get it, Jake? If I can do it, so can you. I shook my head. I don't think so, Tobias. Suddenly, he grew angry. He grabbed me by both my shoulders and actually shook me. Don't you understand, Jake? It's all true. All of it. I pushed him away. I didn't want to hear it. But he kept after me. Jake, it's all true. The Andalite gave us these powers for a reason. Fine, I snapped. You use them. I will, he said. But we'll need you, Jake. You most of all. Why me? He hesitated. Jeez, Jake, don't you understand? I know what I can do and what I can't do. I can't make plans and tell people what to do. I'm not the leader. You are. I laughed rudely. I'm not the leader of anything. He just looked at me with those deep, troubled eyes. Eyes I can now see only in memory. Yes, Jake, you are our leader. You are the one who can bring us all together and help us defeat the controllers. We have the ability to be much more than we are. To have the stealth of a cat and the eyes of eagles and the sense of smell of a dog and the speed of a horse or a cheetah. We're going to need it all if we have any hope of holding out against the controllers. I wanted it to not be true. I wanted none of it to be true, but I knew that it was. I nodded slowly. It felt like I was agreeing to something awful. like I was volunteering for a trip to the dentist or something much worse. It felt like 1,000,000 pounds of weight had just landed on my shoulders. I knew what I had to do next. "Well," I said grimly, "I guess I'd better go find Homer. Homer. That's my dog." Chapter 9. It isn't painful. Morphing, I mean. I petted Homer for a while, feeling like a complete and total fool. "This is the stupidest thing I've ever done," I told Tobias. "Look, you have to concentrate. At least I did, I mean. I formed this mental picture of dude, right? I thought about becoming him." "I see. So I have to, meditate on becoming a dog." "That's right. You have to think about it. You have to want it." Normally I would have figured that he was nuts, but I had just seen him turn into a cat, so if he was nuts, so was I. I thought about becoming Homer. As I stroked his fur, I formed a picture in my mind of me becoming Homer. Homer becoming weirdly quiet while I did. Like he was sleeping, only his eyes were open. "Just like Dude," Tobias commented. "I think the process kind of puts the animal in a trance or something. He's just scared because he thinks his master's a Looney Tune," I continued, stroking Homer's fur and concentrating, and Homer continued to lie very still. "Okay, now what?" I asked Tobias. "Now we better put him outside. He might get slightly freaked by watching you turn into him." It took Homer about 10 seconds to come out of his trance, but then he jumped up, normal, hyperactive Homer again. I put him outside in the yard. Tobias was sitting patiently when I got back, just waiting. "Give it a try," he urged me. "Think about it. Want it." I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes. I recalled the picture of Homer I'd formed in my mind. I thought about becoming Homer. I opened my eyes. "Bow wow," I said, laughing. "Guess it didn't work for me, Tobias." The back of my hand itched, and I scratched. "Jake?" Tobias said. "What?" "Look at your hand." I looked at my hand. It was covered with orange fur. I jumped about a foot, straight up in the air. "Ooh, ooh." I stared at my hand. The fur had stopped growing. "Don't be scared," Tobias advised. "Go with it. Now you've stopped the morph. You have to concentrate." "My hand," I said. "Fur?" "Yeah, and your ears," Tobias said. I ran to the mirror over my dresser. My ears had moved. They had slid up the side of my head and were definitely larger than they should be. "Go on, it's so cool," Tobias said. "Cool? It's creepy. It's weird. Look at my hands. I have fur." "You have to do this," Tobias said. "I don't have to do anything," I said sullenly. Tobias nodded. "Okay, you're right. You don't have to do this. You can just forget what we saw last night and forget what we know. And as the Yeerks take over more and more people, you can just ignore it. We can all just go along and grow up in a world where human beings are nothing but bodies to be used by murdering aliens." Okay, when he put it that way, it didn't sound like a great option. "Come on," Tobias urged. I swallowed hard. I closed my eyes. I thought of Homer. Being Homer. I felt the itch again. And when my eyes opened, there was fur growing on my arms, and fur growing on my face, and fur curling up from under my collar. My legs itched, and I realized they were growing fur too. My bones, well, they didn't exactly hurt, but they did feel very strange. You know when you go to the dentist and he gives you Novocaine so the drill doesn't really hurt, but you know it should hurt. I guess that's what it's like. My bones shortened. I could feel my backbone stretching as it extended out into a tail. There was a scraping sound as my knees suddenly reversed direction. I toppled forward, no longer able to walk upright. When my hands hit the floor, they weren't exactly hands anymore. The fingers were gone. All that was left were short, stubby nails. My face bulged out. My eyes drew closer together. Tobias got up and tilted the mirror down so I could see myself. I watched the final transformation as the last patches of my pink human flesh disappeared. And the tail, my tail, sprouted to its full length. I was a dog. It was insane, but just the same, I was a dog. I know I should be scared by all this, only I wasn't. I was ecstatic. I was giddy. I was thrilled. Happiness just washed over me. Happiness filled me up. I breathed in through my ridiculously long nose and wow. Wow, the smells. Oh man, you have no idea. I breathed in and right away I knew my mom was toasting a waffle in the kitchen. And I knew Tobias had walked through the territory of a big male dog. And I knew things I couldn't even explain in human words. It was like being blind all your life and then suddenly you can see. I ran over to Tobias and sniffed his shoe. I wanted a better idea of who the big male dog was. From the scent his urine picked up by Tobias's shoe, I got sort of a picture of him. See, Homer knew him. His owners called him Steak. He was neutered like me. He spent most of his time in his yard, but he broke out sometimes by digging under his fence. He got a mix of canned and dry food, Purina, no table scraps, unlike me. All this information made me happy all over again, and I had to wag my tail. I looked up at Tobias. He looked tall and strange and not very colorful. I wasn't all that interested in looking at stuff. Smelling things was way better. Intruder! There was a noise in the yard. A dog. An unknown dog in my yard. An intruder! I ran to the window and perched against it and cut loose. Woof! Woof! I barked as loud as I could. No way some unknown dog was just going to walk through my yard. Jake, get a grip! Tobias said. That's Homer out there. Homer? What? But I tucked my tail between my legs. What was going on? Jake, listen to me, Tobias said. It's just what happened to me when I morphed into a cat. The dog brain is part of your brain now. You have to deal with it.
But there's a dog in my yard.
That's Homer, Jake. You are Jake. You're just in a body copied from Homer's DNA. That's the real Homer out there. You put him out there. Focus. You are Jake. Jake. I took several deep breaths. The smells. Oh boy, there was this one smell I couldn't quite. Focus, Jake. I ordered myself. Focus. Slowly, I calmed down the dog part of my mind. Let go of the smells. Let go of the sound of a dog in your yard. It wasn't easy that first time. Being a dog is so completely amazing. For one thing, there's nothing halfway about it. You're never sort of happy, you're happy. You're never sort of bummed, you're totally, completely bummed. And boy, when you get hungry in dog form, you are nuts on the subject of food. There was a knock on my bedroom door. Yes, my bedroom door. I knew who I was again. I was Jake. Jake with 4 legs, a tail, and a snout. But Jake. The knocking seemed incredibly loud to my dog ears. Jake, you got Homer in there with you? My brother Tom's voice. Mom's on the phone. Stop him yapping. He opened the door and stepped in. He looked around, confused. Who are you? He demanded of Tobias. I'm Tobias. I'm a friend of Jake's. Well, where is he? Oh, he's around, Tobias said. Tom looked down at me. There was a strange smell about him. My dog brain couldn't quite identify it. It was an unsettling, dangerous smell. And somehow, in my own mind, I heard the echo of a laugh. A very human laugh I had heard the night before, as Vizier 3 swallowed the Andalite whole. Bad dog, Tom said to me. You keep quiet. Bad dog. And then he left. I was devastated. I wasn't a bad dog, not really. I was just barking because some other dog was in my yard. Bad dog? I was a bad dog? No, I wanted to be a good dog. I crept into the corner, utterly miserable. Tobias knelt down and patted my head. When he scratched behind my ears, I felt a little better. Chapter 10. I called all the others on the phone after I got done morphing back into my normal body. Tobias took off his own, saying he'd hook up with us later at Cassie's farm. I was on the kitchen phone with Cassie when Tom came in. Oh, there you are. I covered the mouthpiece. Yeah, Tobias said you were up looking for me before. I just wanted you to shut your dog up, Tom said. He turned a chair around backward and straddled it. I hesitated. For some reason, I didn't want to talk to Cassie with Tom listening. I'll just see you there in a couple hours, okay? I told Cassie. I hung up. I looked over at Tom. He's bigger than me, even though I'm not exactly small. His hair is darker, almost black, while mine is brown. I'd always trusted him. He wasn't like a lot of guys who pound on their younger brother. We were always kind of close, at least until the last year or so. Somehow we weren't spending as much time together. Partly it was that he was involved in this club called The Sharing. They did all this stuff together. He was so busy all the time. The thing is, Tom should have been the very first person I told all this stuff that had happened. But as I was sitting there watching him munch toast, I just had this feeling that said, no, this had to be a secret, even from Tom. Instead, I told him the other thing I was afraid to tell him. I didn't make the team, I said. What team? He asked. He looked puzzled. What team? The basketball team, your old team. Oh, too bad, he said. Too bad? I repeated. I could not believe how little he seemed to care. It's just sports, he said. He munched another big bite of toast. Just sports? I couldn't stop repeating what he said. Tom saying sports were no big deal. No way. He lived for sports. Yeah, I guess I just don't have your total skill. He shrugged. Well, I quit the team anyway. A couple days ago. I practically fell out of my chair. You quit? You quit the team? And you didn't even talk to me about it? What's the deal? I didn't say anything because I knew you and Dad would make a big thing out of it. Look, there are more important things than throwing balls through hoops, he said. He had this mysterious look in his eyes. I figured he meant girls were the more important thing. Besides, he added, we do much cooler stuff at the sharing. Maybe you should join up. I was stunned. Obviously, Tom and I were further apart than I'd realized. When we were done talking, I headed outside to mow the lawn. I mow the lawn every Saturday. It's a major chore. That and taking out the trash, which I hate. Because we have to do all this recycling stuff. When I was finally done mowing and trimming and raking, I hopped on my bike and took off. I had arranged with everyone to hook up at Cassie's farm. It isn't exactly a normal farm, although it had been in the old days. And they do still have horses and a cow. But now the big red main barn is the wildlife rehabilitation clinic. Cassie's father runs it. They take in any kind of injured animal except pet-type animals. There are always lots of birds along with squirrels and deer and skunks and so on. Sometimes they get a bobcat or a fox or even a wolf. Cassie's mom is a vet too, but she works at the gardens. That's this huge amusement park that has a zoo, or I guess they call it a wildlife park. Luckily, Cassie really loves animals. It would have been hard having her parents if she didn't really love animals. Me, I have a dog. Tobias has a cat. Cassie has everything from porcupines to polar bears. By the time I got there, Marco, Tobias, and Rachel were already waiting outside the barn. Rachel had her face turned up to catch the tanning rays of the sun. Cassie wasn't there yet. I figured she was doing chores. She had tons of work to do around there. Hey guys, I said. Rachel opened her eyes and immediately thrust a newspaper at me. Look, she said, pointing to an article. I started to read the article. It wasn't very long. It said that police claimed there had been a disturbance in the construction site the night before. It said several people had called, claiming they'd seen flying saucers landing there, followed by bright lights. Cool, I said, looking up, so the cops know about it now. That's a relief. Keep reading, Rachel said. The article went on to say that the police had arrived on the scene and found a group of teenagers playing with fireworks. The teenagers had run away. Fireworks were discovered at the scene. The police spokesman had laughed at the reports of flying saucers. It was just a bunch of kids playing where they shouldn't have been, he said. There were definitely no flying saucers. People shouldn't be so quick to believe nonsense. But this is a total lie, I said. Ding, 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 correct answer. Johnny, tell our contestant what he's won, Marco said. Did you see the last part? Rachel pressed. I read the last sentence. It froze me up good, I can tell you. Police were offering a reward for information on the teenagers. They're looking for us, Marco said. Why would the police be... why would they lie? I wondered aloud, but the answer was pretty obvious. Marco laughed his sardonic laugh. Heh, let's see, Captain Brilliant. Would it be because the cops are controllers? Probably not all cops, Tobias pointed out. If the police have been infiltrated by the controllers, who knows how many others have too? Rachel asked. Teachers? People in the government? The newspapers and the TV? Math teachers, for sure. Marco joked. We all looked around nervously, like we expected to find ourselves surrounded by controllers. I tried to tell myself it was all a dream, Rachel said. Been there, I said. For a while, no one said anything. We all felt the same terrible feeling, like we were all alone. Like suddenly we were dealing with stuff that was way, way, way over our heads. Marco spoke first. Look, why do we have to deal with this? I say we just forget it. We never talk about it. We never morph. We just deal with our own lives. Tobias and Rachel both looked at me. They were waiting for me to argue with Marco. Marco, I halfway agree with you, I started to say. Suddenly, Marco just went ballistic. We could get killed, he yelled. Don't you get it? You saw what happened to the Andalite. I mean, this is radical stuff, Jake. This is for real. Real! We could get killed. Tobias was looking at Marco with this sideways look, like he thought maybe Marco was some kind of coward. I knew better. Marco had his reasons. Marco shook his head in a quiet voice. Look, I think these controllers are jerks. But if something happens to me, my dad, he wouldn't be able to handle it. 2 years ago, Marco's mom died. She drowned. They never even found her body. Marco's dad lost it, big time. He totally fell apart. He quit his job as an industrial engineer because he couldn't handle being around other people. Now he was working as a night janitor, making barely enough to support Marco. He spent his days sleeping or watching TV with the sound off. You can all think I'm a weasel if you want, Marco said. I don't care. But if I get killed or something, my dad will flat out die. He's only hanging in there because of me. I wondered if I should go pat him on the back or something, but if I had, Marco, being Marco, would have just said something sarcastic. There's Cassie, Rachel said, shielding her eyes and looking off across the open field. A horse galloped across the green. Its black mane was flying in the warm breeze. I didn't see any rider. The horse slowed, trotted closer, and suddenly, I had a strange feeling about the horse. Cassie and I have been here for a while, Rachel said by way of explanation. She's really good at this. Look how fast she can do it. The horse nickered softly. Then the animal began to melt. The big brown eyes became slightly smaller. The long muzzle became a human mouth. A thing that was part horse and part Cassie smiled at us with big horse teeth and said, "Hey kids!" Marco suddenly sat down, very hard. He had never seen a morphing. It's cool, I said, trying to sound very relaxed. It's just Cassie. I decided I'd better be a gentleman and look away. After all, when Tobias and I had morphed, we'd kind of morphed right out of our clothes. But I noticed that as Cassie emerged from the horse, she was wearing a skin-tight blue outfit. One of those outfits girls wear to do aerobics. I watched and saw something beautiful happen. For just a few seconds, she stayed half horse and half human. She reminded me of the Andalite. I realized it was deliberate. Cassie was controlling the way she morphed. Geez, Rachel, I said. You're right. Cassie is good. Suddenly, we heard the sound of tires on gravel. We all spun around. Down the gravel and dirt road came a single black and white car. The cops! Tobias said. Chapter 11. Cassie! Morph! Now! I snapped. The police car was coming fast. We do not want to have to explain a half-horse, half-person. Which way should I morph? Cassie wailed. Horse or human? She reared up slightly on her hind legs. I knew what was happening. She was fighting the horse's urge to panic. Human! 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 I said. Everybody stand in front of her. The police car squealed to a stop, sending the gravel flying. A single policeman stepped out. I waved at him. Morning, he said. You kids, hiding something? I wanted to look over my shoulder and see what kind of shape Cassie was in, but that would have been a mistake. Hiding something? I repeated. Step aside, all of you, he ordered. We did, revealing Cassie, fully human. The policeman looked puzzled, but then he shrugged. I breathed a huge sigh of relief. Can we help you, officer? Rachel asked in her best, responsible voice. We're making some inquiries, he said, still looking at Cassie like something must be wrong with her. We're looking for some kids who were shooting off fireworks at the construction site across from the mall last night. Suddenly, Marco started coughing. Something the matter with him? The policeman asked. Nope, I said. Nothing wrong with him. We want these kids, the policeman said. We want them real bad. See, it was dangerous what they did. Someone could have been hurt. So we want to find the kids. Suddenly I knew. He was one of them. The policeman was a controller. I looked at his face. It seemed normal, but inside his head was a creature from another planet. An evil, parasitic slug. Just behind those normal, human-looking eyes, something vile lurked. I don't know anything about it, I lied. He looked at me real close, and I began to sweat. Hey, you know what? He said. You look familiar. You look like a young man I know named Tom. He's my brother, I said. I was trying not to let my voice go weird, but I just couldn't forget the fact that it wasn't really some normal human cop I was talking to. It was a yerk. This wasn't even a human anymore. Not really. It was a human controller. The human brain was totally enslaved. Tom's your brother, eh? Well, he's a good kid. I know him from the sharing. I'm one of the adult supervisors. Great group, the sharing. You should come to a meeting. Yeah, Tom invited me already, I said. We have a lot of fun. Yeah, I repeated. Well,
You call me if you hear anything about these kids in the construction site. I should warn you, they may come up with some wild story to conceal their guilt, but you're too smart to believe a bunch of crazy lies, aren't you? He's a regular genius, Marco said. Finally, the policeman took off. Okay, rule number 1, Rachel announced firmly. We don't do anything to attract attention. We have to be secret about everything, especially morphing. Cassie looked embarrassed. Yeah, it was stupid of me. It's just, man, it is so amazing running like that. Out in the open spaces, running and running. How did you manage to morph with your clothing? I asked. When Tobias and I did it, well, let's just say it's a good thing neither of you girls were around. It took some practice, Cassie said, and it can only be tight clothing. I tried with a coat on, it got shredded. I don't know what we'll do in winter. That's not going to be a problem, Marco said firmly, because there isn't going to be any more morphing. Maybe Marco is right, Rachel said. This is too big for us. We're just kids. We need to find someone important to tell this to. Someone we can trust. We can't trust anyone, Tobias said flatly. Anyone could be a controller. We tell the wrong person, we're all dead, and the whole world will be doomed. I don't want to stop morphing, Cassie said. Do you realize all we could do with this power? We could communicate with animals, maybe. Help save endangered species. Humans may be the next endangered species, Cassie, Tobias said quietly. What do you say, Jake? Cassie asked. Me? I shrugged. I don't know. Marco's right. We could all get killed. Rachel's right. This is too major for a bunch of kids. I hesitated. I didn't like what I was about to say. But Tobias is right, too. I mean, the whole world is in danger, and we can't trust anyone. So what do we do? Rachel demanded. Hey, it's not up to me to decide, I said hotly. Let's take a vote, Rachel said. I vote we live long enough to get driver's licenses, Marco said. I vote we do what the Andalites said. Fight, Tobias said. You've never even been in a fight, Marco sneered. You can't handle punks at school. Suddenly you want to go all John Rambo on this Vizier 3 freakazoid? Tobias said nothing, but a blush spread up his neck. I vote with Tobias, Rachel said, giving Marco a dirty look. I wish we could dump all this on someone else, but we can't. Let's think it over for a while, Cassie said. This is a big decision. I mean, it's not like we're deciding whether to wear jeans or a skirt. I was relieved. Thank goodness for Cassie. Yeah, let's wait for a while, I agreed. In the meantime, no one say anything to anyone. We just go back to normal life. There was a smirk on Marco's face. He thought he'd won, but I wasn't so sure. Tobias was still blushing. He sent a secret, grateful look to Rachel. Marco and I took off toward my house, trying to act normal. We talked about the baseball season. We talked about who's going to slaughter who in Dead Zone 5, which is this game we were going to play on my computer. By the time we'd reached my house, we'd run out of stuff to talk about. We played Dead Zone for a while. Neither of us did very well. Face it, games weren't all that interesting anymore. My mind was totally not there. Tom came in after a while. Hey, you guys, he said. Can I give that a try? It had been months since Tom had done anything with me like play a game. Sure. Marco moved over and gave Tom the controller. We played for a few minutes and Tom did pretty well. But then it was like he got bored or something. He gave the controller back to Marco and just sat back and watched. You guys hear about all the stuff going on with the construction site last night? He asked me. Marco jerked in surprise. What stuff? I said. It was in the newspaper, Tom said casually. They said some kids were shooting off fireworks. A bunch of morons who live around there decided it was a flying saucer or something. He laughed. Flying saucers, right. Marco and I both laughed. Yeah, and it was just these kids playing with fireworks, Tom said. Uh-huh, I said. I was trying very hard to concentrate on the game. You were out at the mall last night, weren't you? Tom asked me. Uh-huh. Did you come back to the construction site? I shook my head. No way. Didn't see any kids hanging around there, maybe? Nope. It's not like I'd get them in trouble, Tom said. I mean, I think it's kind of cool. They're just shooting off fireworks, and they get these people terrified of flying saucers. Uh-huh. Flying saucers.
he said. He laughed again. Only complete dips believe in that kind of stuff. He leaned close. You don't believe in that, do you? Aliens and little green men from Mars? I wanted to say no. None of them had been little or green, but I just said, no way. Tom nodded and stood up. Cool. You know, Jake, I feel like we haven't been hanging around much lately. I guess not, I agreed. That's too bad, he said. He snapped his fingers like he just had an idea. You know, you should join the sharing. Marco, too. Why should we join? Tom just grinned. I gotta go, he said. He gave me a playful punch on the shoulder. Catch you guys later, and don't forget, let me know if you hear anything about those kids at the construction site. He left. Marco looked at me. Jake, he's one of them. What? Tom is one of them. Your brother is a controller. Chapter 12. I swung my fist and caught Marco in the side of the head. He jumped back and I swung again, but Marco was quick. He dodged my second swing, and I slipped and went down. Marco snatched the bedspread off my bed, threw it over me and tangled my arms up, and sat on me. Jake, quit acting like a dork, he said. I was trying to grab him, but he had me pretty good. Take that back, I yelled. Not likely, Marco said. You think it's just a coincidence he's suddenly all interested in what happened at the construction site? I knew it looked bad, even while I was struggling to get free and give Marco the boots. I had this sudden flash about the smell I'd noticed on Tom when I was morphing into the dog, and there was that laugh I'd heard at the site. But no. This was Tom, my big brother. Tom would never, ever have let those slimy creeps into his head. Never. I'll let you up if you'll calm down, Marco said. Look, maybe I'm wrong, okay? I stopped struggling, and Marco let me up. You have to admit it, Jake. It doesn't look good. Tom is not one of them, okay? That's final, I said. Whatever, Marco said. Just don't punch me again, because I might have to hit you back. Just then I heard this fluttering noise at my window, like someone beating on it very softly. I went to the window, followed by Marco. There was a bird there, some kind of huge bird like an eagle or a hawk, beating its wings against the window.
Let me in, alright? I can't hover here forever.
Marco's eyes went wide. He'd heard it too. I opened the window and the bird flew straight in. It landed on my dresser. It was almost 2 feet long, mostly brown, with gnarled talons and a sharp hooked beak. It's some kind of eagle or something, Marco said.
A red-tailed hawk, actually.
Tobias said. Is that you, Tobias? Marco demanded. I thought we weren't going to do this anymore.
I never agreed to that.
Well, morph back, Tobias, I said. You know what the Andalite said. Never stay in any form for more than 2 hours. Tobias hesitated. He tilted his hawk head and peered at me with an incredibly concentrated gaze. At last, he hopped over onto my bed. Let me tell you something. It is beyond weird watching feathers turn into skin. The brown feathers ran together and merged and turned pink. It was like the feathers were melting, like they had turned into wax and were being heated up. The beak disappeared quickly, and lips grew out of it. The talons split into 5 and became toes. Halfway through the process of changing, Tobias was a lump, half pink, half brown, with feather-like patterns still visible on his back and chest. His face was small and mostly human, except that he still had those sharp, alert hawk's eyes. 2 tiny, shriveled arms protruded from the front of his chest with fingers like a baby's. All in all, it was a pretty disgusting sight. But the human DNA asserted itself over the hawks and he became more normal. About 3 minutes after he'd started changing, there was a completely normal Tobias sitting naked on the end of my bed. I haven't figured out how to morph with clothes on yet, like Cassie, he said sheepishly. Can I borrow some? I loaned him a pair of pants and a shirt, but my shoes were all the wrong size. That was the coolest thing I've ever done in my life, Tobias said. His whole face was glowing. I was riding the thermals. What's a thermal? I asked. That's when there's warm air rising up from the ground. It forms this cushion under your wings. You can just float up there, like a mile up, and you just surf the thermals. You guys have to do it. It is the best thing ever. Tobias, how on earth did you do a hawk morph? I demanded. There's an injured hawk right there in Cassie's barn, he said. There's this cool osprey too, but I decided on the hawk. How did you fly if the hawk you morphed into was injured? I wondered. Marco shook his head pityingly. Jake, do you pay attention in biology class? DNA has nothing to do with some injury. I ignored Marco. You're lucky Cassie's dad didn't catch you, I said to Tobias. He's depressed, Tobias commented. Who's depressed? Cassie's dad? No, the hawk, I mean. I think he knows they aren't trying to hurt him or anything, but he can't stand being cooped up there while his wing heals. Tobias's eyes darkened. It's terrible when birds have to be locked up in cages. They should be free. Yeah, free the birds, Marco commented. I'll get the bumper stickers printed up. You wouldn't have that attitude if you'd been up there with me, Tobias said angrily. It was cool being a cat, but a hawk. It's just total, absolute freedom. I hadn't ever seen Tobias so happy. I mean, Tobias has a pretty lousy home life. Thinking about it, I suddenly had this feeling. I repeated the warning. No more than 2 hours in a morph, right? You keep track of time, right? Tobias smiled. Yeah, I don't have a watch or anything, but with Hawk's eyes, you can actually see the hands of someone's watch when they're half a mile below you. It's like being Superman. You can fly, plus you have supervision. Now he's Superman, Marco muttered. I was looking around. I guess I thought I might be able to see something from the air, Tobias said. I was looking for something that might be a yerk pool. The phrase sounded vaguely familiar. I remembered Vizier 3 saying something about yerk pools. What's a yerk pool? I asked Tobias. It's where the yerks live in their natural state. Every 3 days, a yerk has to leave his host body and go into the yerk pool to soak up nutrients, especially Candrona rays. Marco and I exchanged a suspicious look. Neither of us knew any of this. At the end, Tobias explained, when the Andalite told us all to run for it, I stayed behind for a few seconds. I guess maybe I was too scared to even run. I shook my head. I knew better. Tobias just hadn't wanted to leave the Andalite alone. I think maybe the Andalite meant even more to Tobias than to the rest of us. Anyway, he gave me visions. I guess you'd call them pictures. Information. A lot of it all at once, all jumbled. I haven't even started to sort it all out, but I do know about the yerk pools and the Candronia. Marco held up his hand, silencing Tobias. Let me check the door, he said. He went to my door and peeked into the hallway. All clear, he announced. Tobias gave Marco a questioning look. Tom, Marco said. He's one of them. Don't make me hurt you, I warned him angrily. Tom is not a controller. Either way, we should be careful, Tobias said. He lowered his voice. The Candrona is a device that produces Candrona particles. See, it's like the little portable version of the Yerk's own homeworld sun. The Yerks need Candrona particles to live, like a human needs vitamins or whatever. The Candrona particles are beamed from wherever the Candrona is concentrated in the Yerk pool. Once every 3 days, every Yerk has to leave his host and go into the pool. They soak up the particles and then they re-enter the host body. What does this have to do with you flying around playing Superman? I asked. While it seems dumb now, I was thinking maybe I could see the yerk pool. He made a rueful smile. Saw a lot of swimming pools and some ponds. You get up there and you realize there are ponds and lakes and streams everywhere. But I didn't see anything special. And what if you found some yerk pool? Then what? Marco demanded. Then we'd blow it up. Wrong, Marco said. We decided not to get into this. No, we decided not to decide yet, I said. Well, I've decided, Tobias said. Suddenly the Wimpy's a hero, Marco sneered. This time Tobias didn't blush. Maybe I just found something worth fighting for, Marco. You don't even fight for yourself, Marco said. That was before, Tobias said softly. Before the Andalite, before he died trying to save us. I can't let that go. I can't let him die for nothing. So whatever you guys decide, I'm going to fight.